Beautiful. We are live. Welcome, everyone. This is my second in a series of offerings related to alternative paradigm options for our communities. And today I am so excited to welcome my friend, colleague, local food producer, and leader in sustainable agriculture in the region where I live. Her name is Bess Legault. Welcome, Bess. Thank you so much for being here with me this morning. We are up early at Farmer Hour. I'm still wiping the sleep out of my eyes, so a little bit groggy.
Me too.
Bess has joined me here today because for many reasons, I see her as being an absolute expert in the area that I'm sharing about, or that we're going to be sharing about today, and that I believe in so strongly and see such an incredible importance of in these times. And this is in the area of sustainable agriculture, local food security. So I'm going to let Bess introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she does and who she is. So thank you, Bess.
Thank you so much, Shashala. It's a pleasure to be here, and I feel so honored that you would invite me to talk on a topic I'm very, very passionate about. So I'm a first generation farmer. I literally learned what a carrot looked like growing in the ground at 25 years old. I just had my birthday last week, and 13 years later, I've been able to kind of not only figure out what farming is and how to be a part of that, and steward land and build soil and connect to community around that. But I've also figured out that a lot of other people care to know about these things too. And it's as part of our lives in this food system that we all depend on that we don't necessarily get to have a piece of or be a part of. And so I just want to say that I see you in our community and your lovely family and the group of sustainable farmers that are trying to find steps forward in stewarding land and creating regional food systems that can create our food security and access. We feel the support, and just being able to just have folks come out and see what it's about and have that support, and actually building the beds and growing the food really, really helps to give us confidence that we're not just these crazy folks trying to do something different, and that the world is supporting, or our communities are supporting what we're up to. Because a lot of us first generation farmers that are going back on smaller, medium, or even larger scale parcels of land, we're doing this to feed our families and ourselves, and we're finding really strong and deep connections in our communities as we do that. And I don't know about you, but that's the epitome of filling my cup and a change that I would really like to see in the world. And yeah, and that's what we're up to here. So that's my informal version of what I've been up to. I got the privilege of coordinating a farmer-led farmer support program called the Northern Cohort. And it's literally an opportunity to build relationships and just weave connections within the community. We started out with some surveys, just asking farmers, hey, what are your opportunities? What are your challenges? What things can help you? And 2.5 years later, we've launched a food hub network. It's going to be this small little organically grown thing where we create the framework and the farmers show up. They build their businesses and they build their connections, and they weave even more food access coming into the community, which we're already seeing happen. It's only been a week since we launched it officially. And then things are happening like yesterday. We had this incredible field day. We're in the Peace region of British Columbia that is large plots of land and dominated by grain production and cattle production. But we have these awesome little microclimates and these innovators who are starting to explore soft fruits like haskap and sour cherry. Raspberries grow really well up here. And together we're figuring out how to ensure that we're growing with soil health in mind. We're connecting with each other so that we can learn from each other's experiences and what the North has to offer versus what we need to make sure we don't do wrong. And yeah, it's just this, I don't know, it's this, it gives me so much hope for the future. We had
totally, Bess. And this is really what I'd love to start our conversation about, because that is a big reason why I'm doing these offerings online. I see people, I'm now involved in an international community of very passionate people who are looking to create a new world. And that is really motivated by their clear observation of what is not working, but beyond just feeling helpless, hopeless, and kind of, running in fear. They are ready to really engage in some meaningful change and take responsibility for how their future looks. And the area that seems to be, kind of like the ground floor in that has to do with our security, and particularly our food security. Even in these last few months, we are seeing all kinds of things regionally, nationally, globally, even with regards to, food shortages, blocks in, the, food chain transfer. And it looks like the prognosis for the longer term view is that we're going to be seeing more and more of that. My audience, I feel and I understand, are in all these different areas of the world. So they're, in different climates and different regions, and yet, and I believe also that they are likely coming from a variety of different backgrounds. Some of them may already be farming at some level, and I think a lot of them are starting to really see the importance of growing their own food, even in their backyards. I do also know that there are some of them that are living in cities and have never grown anything. So where I'd like to go with our conversation is, first of all, I want to bring their awareness to the idea that this is, so timely, this growth in the international movement, in the scene that's been happening. And I'd like you to tell us from your perspective how you've seen this grow over the last, say decade or so that you've been involved in it, both regionally, possibly even nationally and internationally, what you've noticed.
Really great question. And I actually feel like I can speak to that slightly because I'm Canadian who grew up in Ontario, studied sustainable alternative food systems and biology, and came to British Columbia because it was the holy grail of local food systems. So my partner and I, we got in our van and we came out this way, and we worked on one of the first certified organic farms in the Okanagan, and recognized that he was really proud to pay Canadians Canadian wage to grow the food that he was making available in the Okanagan. But even with our food system, where 5% return often is returned to farmers, and that's why you see smaller holders trying to do the direct market sales on their own, so they can capture what the distribution system would otherwise capture. And so what I'm kind of speaking to is that there's been a whole bunch of shifts occurring. There was a lot of people growing food and knowing the value of it, trying to connect to farmers, but getting burnt out, or to people and the consumers, but getting burnt out working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, trying to wear all the hats and then keep the paperwork up for the organic certification and all these other things. And then what's happening in British Columbia is we have a pretty strong level of support coming out of the Ministry of Agriculture that is having a voice for at least provincial food security. It's having a voice for how to support purchasing power on various scales. So there's a Buy BC program, which allows consumers to know what products are produced in BC. Those are hands-off sales primarily. So that's when you go to a grocery store and you actually see branding for British Columbia. It's pretty cool that somebody has cared about that they're growing in British Columbia, that they've gone through the steps and that we're trying to make it visible so that we can make those choices instead of always choosing the international alternatives. I think in Canada, for the most part, we're really proud of the product that's made here. It's just convincing or changing the system so more of it stays within Canada. Right now, even in British Columbia, the definition of food security was getting agro-technology so that we can grow more, so that we can export and maintain that economics and the economic security of food production. And so we need to remember in Canada that we are resource rich. The rest of the world does demand, or not demand, it does depend on a certain level of some of the crops and the things that we're growing. And that's where the movement in British Columbia and across the country as well, on trying to carve out regional food systems and have multiple sales channels. So if you are a larger ecologically minded producer, ideally, so we have nutrient dense crops, you can actually take a portion of that and add that to your regional food security, food system. And then if you need to export, feel free, but we need to, and I think that's a parallel we can have with most industries in Canada as a result.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel as though people are, this is just so incredible that these organizations are forming and these networks are forming at this time, because really, you're speaking from the side of producers and the challenges that they're feeling, these small scale producers that are experiencing I've witnessed personally the small scale producers that I've been involved at working with and volunteering with, that they do so much of this just out of their own generosity, their own desire to be part of this movement. Like we've talked about this before, like what they end up getting back for a bunch of carrots, it's almost like sometimes they're literally going in the hole, because there's so much time and energy and money that goes into, creating the infrastructure, and then all the steps in the process of the producing. And it's incredibly overwhelming. So here we have this beautiful scenario where we've got an increasing number of consumers that are ready to be part of this because they actually care about food security. I feel like that's what the majority of our listeners today are. They are these consumers that are going, okay, we don't maybe grow food for ourselves, but we also realize that going to the grocery store and getting our food is going to become less and less reliable. And it would be beautiful to see it transition between where they are right now, which is being entirely dependent on this system that's not only flawed, but really unstable at the moment. And where they could be, even like I was imagining before our chat this morning, I was like, okay, well, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're coming into the fall. It's not like the beginning of the producing season where we could have people jumping in, volunteering on farms, or getting involved in some of their local farming initiatives at the onset of the season. We're at the end of the season, but I was imagining, well, that could be valuable time for people to get involved.
It's the best time to get involved.
It's the time where our farmers markets, which I hope we get into talking about a little bit, are just bursting at the seams, ideally, in many regions here in the Northern Hemisphere right now, bursting at the seams with produce. And what an amazing opportunity for people to have, if they haven't already been participating in going to farmers markets and meeting local farmers. This is an incredible time of year to do that. So I just want you to give a general sense of what is the ideal way for consumers to begin that relationship in a meaningful, sustainable, long-term way.
Yeah, well, thank you. You're speaking to my favorite part about farming. As I mentioned, I'm a first generation farmer, and what got me was the excitement on people's faces when they popped a cherry tomato in their mouth, or they bit one of the sweetest carrots they ever had because I pulled it out of the ground that morning, And so this is the best time of year to get engaged and excited about local food. We've spent the whole year preparing beds, planting things, fostering these little baby seedlings so they'll survive in the fields, tending them and weeding them, and then hoping and propping them up so that they'll grow to the best fruition. And now's the time where we get to celebrate that. It's the harvest. It's, it's the best part. It's the reason why it's when you actually get to taste something that came from a local soil and a local person, or even better, you got to be a part of that in the first place. And I met a wise harmonic farmer once who once told me that, you see this apple, Bess? I planted the seed of this apple 20 years ago. So I'm going to get more energy from this apple than you will, because we have a relationship. And that inspires me. It's what kept me and keeps me getting my toes dirty in the soil and feeling, the regeneration that occurs when you build soil, and you get all these nutrients are popping up into these beautiful flavors that you get to share with the community. And so I just encourage people to find their local farmers markets. You mean often they're on the weekend, they're a bit of an event, but that means it's fun. Bring the whole family down and your friends. It's a place to gather and connect. It's a place to slow down in our really busy society as well. I laugh because it's hard for me to slow down because I'll have a million conversations when I go to the farmers market, because I've been out in the community for 7 years now providing food, and it's really difficult for me to not find somebody who's excited to see Farmer Bess at the market. And they feel the same way about so many other farmers in our community. And it is a privilege to be able to be a food provider. Takes a lot of effort to make yourself available all the time in the community. And so that's where programs like you've started, Ashala, with trying to connect volunteers on farms and provide opportunities for folks, really is taking that next step of support. Because I feel like a lot of people are excited about local food, and a lot of small family farms are trying their best to not only grow it, but make it visible on social media, but also visible by making their homes and farms available to people. And sometimes it's nice if people want to like hunt us down to see if they can be a part of it, because it's another thing for us to try and find all of that help. And in the end, we're balls of energy getting lots done, and there's always extra work to be done, and
right,
where you can learn what's going on in the process, which is
yeah. And so I love what you're saying, Bess, because really I feel as though I'm putting myself in the shoes of many of the viewers that are likely have gone to the farmers market, perhaps even met some of their local farmers, but it's a bit intimidating, right? To say, how can I be involved? Like to not go up and go, oh my gosh, I'm so scared about the winter, and I'm prepping and filling my basement full of food. I mean, that's maybe a conversation, right? There's a conversation about like food storage is a great conversation.
absolutely
Like I feel like I really want to encourage the viewers to realize that any step in this process, there's an opportunity to share wisdom, to learn and understand. And I like to see, I mean, you could stand there and talk to your local food producer and really bend their ear for hours, but like you say, market day is pretty busy, right? I feel like what it could be a great way to invite a more meaningful, longer conversation to say, I'd like to come and visit your farm, or are you doing anything like a harvest day or a U-pick or a, do you have it? I'm just coming up with ideas in my head. Do you want to add to that with other ways that you as a food producer would like to see people who are interested in getting involved in volunteering approach?
Yeah, no, I think that's quite a brilliant one. I think a big part of it's going to be managing expectations on what that actually looks like on either end. One of the things that I really, really value starting a program, I guess, under a not-for-profit that has a diversity of support systems and educated people that can coordinate and help things, is the coordination of that would be kind of helpful. And so this is why so many of us, and I don't mean to refer to your volunteer support too many times, but that idea of just bridging those relationships and having that communication about what expectations are, and how much time, will there be food, will there be somewhere I can let my child play? I mean, these are questions that people have, and if it's not on the farmer to answer all those questions, it really helps bridge those gaps and allows for folks to come out. So I guess if you are trying to go out on a farm, just recognize that we're busy and we're excited to have the help, but maybe just make sure that we communicate how many hours you have available, what you'd like in return for that, all these things, because I've had hundreds of people down to my farm, and many of them are just there excited to have a chance to put their toes in the soil with me. But there are other folks who have their time is very valuable to them, and making sure that they come home with food is important to them. And if that's the case, I'm sure as a farmer, I would never say no to that, but I'd like to know that in advance so that we don't have any friction in our communication.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are two really obvious exchanges that I can see. There's getting involved with your physical energy, like saying, I'd like to go up and volunteer. This is what it could look like. And I'm thinking, with your permission, I might include a little link to the volunteer and food producer surveys that we've co-created, because it'll just give people an idea about what that conversation could look like.
Beautiful.
Also, finding out if they're doing any sort of education, if there's any sort of local, educational programs or workshops, or I know seed exchanges are a great place for that sort of growing experience to happen.
Yeah, definitely. What's popping in my brain right now is the number of people who have come into my life who have taken permaculture courses online during the pandemic and have taken that level and invested the time to understand ecosystems and and guilds and layering and how to create and the time it takes to actually foster a food forest. And then we all know how much time it takes to actually put that into action. And so this idea of, well, not this idea, we're going to be organizing permablitzes on farms and on landowners' properties in the area so that we can make these really obvious community-based opportunities so that people can connect and people can get on farm. And it's not just during the daily production, it's kind of like the grinds, like doing your dishes sometimes when you're out there in the field. And so I know as a farmer, I like to make the experience exciting. And so that's why we used to do like planting peas in the peas. And you could come down and bring your kids and help us plant the peas and come back a month later and harvest those peas. And have little events around these things so that people can show up, and it's the flair and the fun of farming, not just the work, because there's a 12-hour day usually in there. And some of it, well, that's where all the help is needed. But we want to make sure that folks who do come out recognize that it's a bit of work, but there's also a reward at the end. So
beautiful, beautiful. And, like I was saying at the beginning here, I feel at this time, most people are beginning, or the people that are viewing us today are really at a place where they're acknowledging that the greatest reward is a sense of security, a sense of like, there's knowledge of how to do this. I mean, it's like, talk about not reinventing the wheel. The best place to learn about growing food in your region is from people who've been growing food in your region. and also to learn, obviously all the pitfalls and also the great, special opportunities, certain things that grow really well in your area, seeds that are known to thrive in the region, and so on. And then the variety, the other thing that I'm really excited about being involved in this movement up here is observing the variety of people who are producing different things. They choose like their orchards or their animal husbandry or their market garden, vegetable garden producers or whatever. And that's exciting to me. So there's another thing, if you're looking for food security for your own family in your own like backyard, to go to, first of all, perhaps the farmers market, to have the first interface with some of the local producers, and then to perhaps, if they are doing anything at their farms by way of having an event or an educational event or a meet and greet or something, to really get out there and get involved, because you'll glean this plethora of information from all their different wisdom and expertise, because nobody does it exactly the same.
no,
and so it's not just about going to one farmer and saying, okay, I'm gonna devote myself to working with you and volunteering here and learning as I go along. And also perhaps, at the very least, this is how I felt when I first came here. I just want to know, as times get more unstable, that I would even know who to connect with. Like say for next year, I would be able to say, gosh, I'm going to drive out to Bess's farm. I'm going to drive out to Katie's farm. I'm going to, go out right at the beginning of the year and say, I want to be involved in what you're planning this year, because I want to know that next winter I'm going to have food in my pantry. And now that kind of brings me on to a topic that I also feel pretty passionate about. I know you do too. And I know there's a lot of positives and negatives of this topic, but I think it's important to share it because some people may not be familiar with the idea of CSAs. So would you share with us just a little bit about what that is basically, and then how you see that as something that can evolve? Because I feel like that's a really powerful movement that has great potential to solve a lot of the food security challenges. So take it away, Beth.
For sure. And I love the segue from building relationships with farmers. And then guess how you build a relationship with a farmer? You choose to support that farmer with your purchasing power. And so a CSA is an acronym for Community Supported Agriculture. And it's a program where it really is just how farmers reduce risk by ensuring they have relationships with a consumer base. And so their consumer community, they sign up earlier in the season, depending on the farm and the variety of things that they will create. You sign up for a small or large box, and it's a weekly or bi-weekly share of the harvest that you come and pick up and you connect in town for. And what happens is that farmer has the security of knowing that if I plant what I'm planting today, I know that 80% of it, because you always like to make sure that there's a farmer's market presence, 80% of it is already sold in a sense. And so I have the confidence that I will be able to economically recover what I invest in the first place. So that gives me a lot of security. And I will say with my farm, Hip Piece Produce, I started off huge going to farmers markets. We grew for 100 families. And what ended up happening was 100 families didn't come out every weekend on the Saturday market. And so we ended up
on the rainy days.
On the rainy days when nobody wants to leave the house. Yeah. And so quite a lot we donated to the Women's Resource Center and the Salvation Army. And, we feel good about that, but didn't negate the fact that I spent money on staff. I put how many months and weeks into growing things, and the seed costs and the equipment costs and the land. All of these things stack up. Farming is generally fairly input heavy, and it's really intensive in your energy after it. And so knowing that your efforts have the financial reward to make sure that you're not going in the hole is really a great way. And so it's provided a lot of stability for a lot of farms across the province and country. And one thing I will say is that the CSA drove me to be a boutique farm, which meant that I grew 131 varieties of fruit, vegetables, and herbs. And as proud as I am of that, it was a lot of work. And in the end, I learned which varieties thrived and which ones didn't. I also learned which ones need more care and which ones were okay not getting as much care. Because when you're growing on 7 acres on your own, with a partner or two, and doing everything by hand, it's quite a lot of effort to be able to keep up with all of that. And so one thing that me and a bunch of the farmers in the area have really kind of resonated on, and this is where this idea of a food hub network comes into place, is that maybe Farmer Best doesn't need to grow 131 varieties, or even if it was just 30 fruits, vegetables, and herbs, regardless of the varieties, that's still a lot of different machine equipment if I wanted to scale up. One thing I learned as somebody who did everything by hand and then got a small tractor, I used 1 jerry can of fuel to do the small little bit of disturbance that I needed to grow 4 to 5 acres. And so it really warped my brain around this black and white thinking of what sustainability is in our food system. And I'm striving towards no-till, absolutely, but there is a process of moving things around and actually not having to do everything by hand to be able to get there. So I'm quite passionate about learning from the small, and then adding a little bit of support through technology or equipment to be able to scale that up so that we're really achieving food security, and we're not just feeding a farmer's market. We're now allowing the grocery stores to not have to ship things up from down south because it's coming.
Yes. Yes.
So we're creatively trying to think about this on many ways, but just knowing that our consumer community out there is caring for us. I don't expect everybody to get a random mix of vegetables every week and know what to do with it. We're finding ways to provide recipes and support people and how to transition away from a convenience food lifestyle to one where you actually take the time and you actually connect and you actually appreciate, and and you get fed by the food that you're eating, not just a chore to get you through the day,
Yeah, well, and I'd like to say as well about community supported agriculture, or CSAs. My first introduction to them was when I was living in the Kootenays, and was an extraordinary program there. And what I remember, kind of my first real understanding of this, was that I wanted to be part of, and everyone that was involved, which was a lot of our local community there, really involved. I'll share about that in a second. Everybody that was involved wanted not like to share the responsibility for the abundance, and to be able to receive the benefit of that harvest, but also the potential responsibility for a failed harvest, because this is about, if we're looking at sustainable relationship, this isn't just about this year. This is about next year and the year after. And if we want to keep our farmers producing and feeling inspired and supported, we need to be able to share when the crops are not as good and our boxes, our food boxes for the same share that we put in are smaller, because it's just the reality of this process. And I feel like if we as local consumers can get behind our producers in these different ways, like get involved with supporting no matter what happens with the crop, because what you're actually building is a relationship of trust that will live over decades. Like, this is, to me, where we're going. We're going to a place of getting back in touch with who grows, who produces the food. And I always think it's also so amazing that when you're eating food grown in your region, it's just, I believe it's actually better for you. It's healthier for you.
Yep, for sure. I want to really thank you for just reminding me what a true CSA is, Ashella. I studied the Canadian food system and learned what a carrot grew, grown in the ground a long time ago. And that's when I was a part of a true CSA, working with my professor on her 2-acre market garden. And it was regardless of the weather and regardless of what comes in, you get your share of what it was. So if it was less, it was less. And if it was abundant, it was abundant. I feel being part of the 2% of Canadians that farm here in Canada, and working my butt off to get to the farmer's market with things and people not showing up. For whatever reason, I don't blame them. But when I spoke to all of these other ideas I have on how to connect with food, I'm speaking to how I can capture more people who aren't engaged and on this channel. You know what I mean? I really, really, really thank you and appreciate that relationship is really, really important to me. And I think as somebody who devalues who I am and what I'm up to, and I don't think that's, I'm going to learn to shed that skin. But it's hard because I don't want to disappoint a person. I don't want them to pay for something they don't get value for. And so it's really interesting, but you've inspired me to offer that true relationship again.
Perspective. Absolutely.
And perspective, because you're right. It would be nice to know that even in a not great year, I'm still financially supported in the efforts that I put forth. The way I'm actually trying to carve out a system so that we can, that we can meet the needs of everybody. And in the end, we really need to start with those that are the most connected and the most passionate. And then we also need to make it more accessible, because for everybody on this channel, there's how many other people that we still need to inspire.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, and I think I was saying to you, I think it was last year, Bess, and my viewers here on this channel know that I'm all about using my intuition and doing a little forecasting into what's coming. And I don't think you're going to have any issue with people being very keen in the next year or two. So it's really more now about understanding that it's time for us to start building the infrastructure, what this looks like. And it's about, like, I also want to encourage the viewers to realize that, you're not right now under the system. If you're showing up at a farmer's market with what you grew in your backyard and, I don't know, it depends on where you are and if it's a rainy day or not. Yeah, there could be a little bit of stepping on toes or whatever, but generally speaking, there's so much room literally to grow into this movement. Like, I think we could see a lot more producers and just change this whole idea about where our food comes from, because we're going to start seeing shortages. And I don't think it's temporary. I think it's permanent. I think this is going to be the new normal. And people are going to need to reframe their understanding of these relationships and the value of, so there's first of all the value of literally getting your food from the local farmer, pre-purchasing your shares in their, even if this isn't set up in your area, I believe you can have this conversation with your farmer. Start somewhere and say, look, I'm willing to invest somehow in what you're producing. invest my time, invest some money. I want to know that there's security down the road for me, and I want to build this relationship. And secondly, that we can learn so much. So, encouraging the food producers to share their knowledge also in a meaningful way. So maybe you're going to show up and do some work in exchange for education, not just expecting them to educate you because they have nothing else to do, because clearly we know they've got a lot else to do. But there's like nothing better than hands-on learning too. You go and volunteer, you're going to really understand.
You go see the carrot.
Yeah, and you go see that process and you're really going to understand. So this is so cool. Yeah, just making sure that we've covered all our topics. I think we have, Bess. This is so lovely. It's been really a pleasure to share with you. And yeah, any last thoughts that you'd like to leave people with about the future and what that could look like, and from your perspective?
Absolutely. I just want to share that small scale farmers and farmers who are caring about soil health are really trying to kind of provide resilience in the extreme weather that we're facing. I really like to talk about the fact that I am a farmer for climate solutions. It was a climatic forecast that I received over 12 years ago in fourth year climate science that really inspired me to figure out my place in this world and how I can make meaningful change. And I don't like pointing fingers at people, so I decided on a path that was progressive and something I could work towards and inspire others to be a part of a change that will actually help. And so localized food systems and supporting farmers who are making land management decisions to actually build soil health. Once you have more organic matter in your production systems, you hold water, you're actually more resilient against droughts and floods. And that means that those farmers that are taking those steps now are actually creating resilience to ensure that they have food for you in the future. And so I just want to speak on to, there's a lot of farmers who are really resonating with the word regeneration. And the regenerative agriculture movement. And what I love about that is it's not a checkbox to like figure out in our system. It's a philosophy and a mindset, and it's a way of thinking about whole system ecology. It's about thinking about water holding capacity. It's thinking about diversity and inclusion, making sure that you have pollinator plants that can ensure that the whole system comes together. It's about wetland restoration, creating habitat, and actually restoring our land. But we can do that in a way that's still productive and we can feed off of. And so what's inspiring me is in the north here, like we're not just organic farmers, we're actually investing in the future of food, and it's taking time and it doesn't instantly happen. But when an orchard gets planted in 7 years, it starts to produce and it goes for another 30, that's food security. And if we can do that in a way that we're also maybe trialing some perennial grain, maybe we're connecting with our neighbor and giving their pigs a place to forage so that we can have their poop restore the nutrients in the soil. And then all of a sudden we've got this system that isn't just one farmer wearing 10 million hats. It's a community. And so think about your place in the food system. Think about what part you might want to be a part of, because most of the landowners and the land stewards that I know of, when we get all our ideas and we want to say, we need help, we want people who want to actually be a part of our food system with us. And so I just want to inspire everybody to think about what you can do, because there's nothing but room to grow.
Awesome. What a way to end. Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you so much. It's been
pleasure,
such a pleasure. And perhaps we'll do this again sometime when I have a new set of fresh questions for you to consider and reflect back to us with. So
I'd love to anytime. Thanks for the
okay. I'm gonna close the recording now, and bye to all. Happy growing relationships and food.